Hi, boys and girls. Today we are going to finish the book Hachi. It is chapter 10, and then we will also read the prologue, which is the end of the book. So here we go. Chapter 10. The day after Hachiko died, Yasu came to the train station as he always did. He was so used to visiting Hachiko and the station master, he did not know what else to do. So he sat down on a wooden bench near the train tracks and looked at the passengers as they exited their trains. As he watched, two women dressed in flowered kimonos stepped onto the platform. They turned eagerly toward Hachiko's waiting place. When they saw that he was not there, they looked at each other in confusion. Yasu rose from his bench and walked over to them. Hachiko's heart stopped beating yesterday, he said, bowing his head with grief. I am so sorry, both women said at once. The Akitakin has died? A student holding a stack of books in his arms stopped in his tracks, stunned. Hachiko is no longer with us? A young mother told her son. Word of Hachiko's death spread quickly throughout Shibaiway Station. As each train pulled up to the platform, the people who stepped off looked to Hachiko's spot as if they could not believe what they were being told. The expressions on their faces turned from hope to pain and sorrow as they saw that the news was true. It was almost more than Yasu could bear. Yasu returned to the wooden bench and sat down wearily. He looked at Hachiko's spot and then shut his eyes. If only when he opened them, he would see his little friend sitting up tall and straight among the crowd, his gaze fixed on the train tracks as he waited for his master. Yasu squeezed his eyes shut even more tightly and then opened them again, hoping for a miracle. But Hachiko's spot was as empty as it had been just moments before. Even though many people were getting off their trains, no one walked over to the place where Hachiko had once waited. Yasu slumped down on the bench, stared straight ahead, and watched person after person walk around Hachiko's spot, just as they had when he was alive. And then he got an idea. He went to Mr. Yashikwa's office and asked his friend to come sit with him on the wooden bench. I have just thought of a way to bring Hachiko back, Yasu said. Mr. Yashikwa looked at him, his eyebrows knitted together in puzzlement. How? He asked. Do you see the people getting off their trains? Asked Yasu. The station master nodded. Do you see how everyone looks at the spot where Hachiko used to sit? The station master nodded again. What if we build a statue of Hachiko and place it on his spot? Yasu asked. Then he will always be with us. That is a wonderful idea, said Mr. Yashikwa. But where will we find the money to pay for it? Excuse me, I do not mean to intrude, said a man wearing thick black frame glasses, but I could not help overhearing your conversation. I do not have much money, but I miss seeing Hachiko sitting there. I will give you what I can to help build the statue. And with that, the man pressed a small silver coin with a hole in the middle worth 5 cien into the station master's white-gloved hand. I will give something too, a woman said, opening her pocketbook. More and more people donated money, and again a story about Hachiko was printed in the newspaper. People from all over Japan were so moved by the tale of a loyal, faithful dog that they sent as much money as they could. After more newspaper stories were written, more people heard about Hachiko. People from as near as the next street over and as far away as the United States all sent money to help pay for a statue to be built at Shibaiway Station. By the time the summer's rains had ended, enough money had been collected to pay for the statue. After much discussion, a well-respected sculptor was selected for the job. He came to the train station to speak to Yasu. Tell me about Hachiko, said the artist. I understand you knew him best. This is where he waited, Yasu said, showing the man the place where Hachiko used to sit. And when he sat up, the top of his head came to about here. He put the flat of his hand to his hip. His eyes were deep-set and small, and his ears were shaped like triangles. Yes, I have seen the pictures in the newspaper, said the artist. Can you tell me something about him I could not see in the photograph? Yasu thought for a moment. Hachiko was completely devoted to the professor, he said. Many people wanted to adopt him, but he would not give him his heart to anyone but his master. Ah, that is very helpful, said the sculptor, nodding. He was kind to all and treated everyone in the same manner, Yasu went on. It did not matter if you were a child or an adult. It did not matter if you were a man or a woman. It did not matter if you were rich or poor. If you wanted to touch Hachiko's fur for luck, he would allow it. He was gentle with everyone. He got upset only when someone tried to move him from his waiting spot. I see, said the artist. Is there anything else? Yasu shut his eyes, and a picture of Hachiko arose in his mind. He was always very dignified, he said, swallowing hard. Even at the end, when he could not sit up tall and straight, he always did his best. All right, Yasu, the man said. I now know what I need. And with a bow of thanks, he left the station. The sculptor went to his studio at once. Day after day after day, he locked himself inside his workspace, but he would not permit anyone to enter. I will let you know when the sculpture is finished, he said to someone he said whenever someone came to his door. Month after month went by, and still there was no word from the sculptor. Almost a whole year had passed since the day Hachiko had died, and it was spring again. Then right after the cherry blossoms bloomed and fell from the trees, the artist announced that the statue was ready. It was covered with a white cloth and brought to Shibuya Station, where a great ceremony was held. Trains scheduled to enter the station were halted between 3 and 4 o'clock. People started arriving at 2:30, and by the time Yasu and his parents reached the station, an enormous crowd had gathered. People spilled over from the platform into the train station, down the steps and onto the street. Yasu struggled to move through the solid wall of people like a carp swimming upstream. He looked back over his shoulder several times to make sure his mother and father were following him. At last they reached the platform and made their way over to the station master, who was standing next to Hachiko's waiting spot. There are so many people here, Yasu said in amazement. Yes, said Mr. Yashikwa. There are teachers and students from Tokyo Imperial University who knew Professor Uno. There are communers who knew Hachi. He pointed to a group of men holding their notebooks and cameras, and there were also reporters. At precisely 3 o'clock, a Shinto priest began a ceremony by saying a prayer that expressed gratitude for the ancestors. Then he asked that those gathered before him would be blessed with health, happiness, prosperity, and protection. Next, a man who taught at the university alongside Professor Uno said a few words. Professor Uno loved the earth, and he loved all the plants, trees, and flowers that grow upon it, said the professor's colleague. He loved to teach, and he loved his students, but most of all, he loved his golden brown Akitakin. The artist who had created the sculpture was next to address the crowd. Many of you have been curious about what I have been doing for the past year, he said. You wondered why no noise came from my studio and why no supplies were carried in or out. That is because I had to prepare myself for the great task I was given. He gestured toward the statue, still hidden from view under its cloth. I needed to sit still for many, many hours, just as Hachiko sat, in order to understand him and appreciate him, the artist said. Only after I had experienced enough stillness and solitude did I feel ready to begin. And then I knew at once exactly what to do. Finally, Mr. Yashikwa spoke. First, he thanked everyone who had donated money to build Hachiko's statue. Without each and every one of you, this would not be possible, he said, spreading his arms wide. Then he motioned for Yasu to join him. I would like to present Yasu Takahashi, the station master said to the people standing on the platform. He was a great friend to Hachiko, and I am sure he has something to say. Yasu stood still and looked at the station master. Mr. Yashikwa nodded and motioned again. They are waiting, Yasu, Mr. Takahashi whispered to his son. Just say what's in your heart, Mrs. Takahashi added. Yasu took a deep breath, stepped in front of the statue, and bowed his respects to the crowd. Hachiko taught us many things, he began, but then he had to stop. His voice was thick with tears and his words sounded broken and shaky. Yasu blinked his eyes and swallowed hard. The train station, usually such a noisy place, was completely quiet as Yasu struggled to calm himself. He looked into the crowd and noticed a little boy in a navy blue sailor suit holding his mother's hand. The boy looked to be about 5 years old, the same age Yasu was on the day he first met the professor and Hachiko. When the little boy saw Yasu looking at him, his face broke into a smile. Yasu smiled back and felt brave enough to go on. Hachiko taught us that we must never give up. So here you can see the picture of them standing at Shibuya Station. Can you see the statue of Hachiko? Yasu said, he taught us about loyalty and devotion. He taught us about hope and faith. He taught us about patience and responsibility. But above all, Hachiko taught us the true meaning of friendship. It is for these reasons we honor him today. Yasu moved closer to the statue and asked Mr. Yashikwa to join him. Together they removed the cloth and stepped back. Everyone gasped. The Akitakin of bronze raised high on a pedestal was Hachiko, sitting up tall and straight, his right ear thrust forward, his left ear drooping down, his eyes staring ahead. Yasu reached up to stroke the sculpture, half expecting to feel soft fur instead of hard metal underneath his fingertips. "What a good dog you are," Yasu whispered to the statue. "What a fine dog you are. Hachiko, you are the best dog in all of Japan." All right, boys and girls, what's really cool about this book is that it's true. It's a true story. It's a true story about a professor that purchased, or I believe, Hachi, his dog, was at the train station as a puppy. And you can even go to the Shibuya train station today in Japan, and you will see a statue of Hachi sitting there waiting for his master. So I'm going to read to you the epilogue, and it says New Year's Day, 1939, 4 years later. So let's see what happens 4 years from now. To celebrate the new year, the entrance to Shibuya Station was decorated with pine tree branches to symbolize strength and bamboo and to symbolize virtue. Yasu, now a 20-year-old student at Tokyo Imperial University, climbed to the stairs of the station carrying a gift of sweet mochi cakes wrapped in blue to give to Mr. Yashikawa for the holiday. There was a long line of travelers waiting to see the station master. Yasu stepped up onto the platform and sat down on the wooden bench across from Hachiko's statue to wait for his friend. When Yasu sat was now known as the Hachiko side of the station. It was not uncommon to hear one person say to another, "I will meet you at Hachiko's statue after work," or "Meet me at Hachiko at 6 o'clock. As Yasu looked toward Hachiko's statue, he noticed a girl about his own age. She was tall, slender, and very pretty, and her cheeks were bright and cold. Her hair was fastened with an ornament of white paper flowers, and she wore an elegant silk kimono embroidered with delicate plum blossoms. The girl stood with her back towards Hachiko, glancing to her right and to her left. She looked up at the big clock hanging from the ceiling inside the train station and tapped her foot. Yasu kept his eye on the girl as she waited. He knew it was rude to stare, but he could not turn away. The girl was scowling now, her forehead furrowed and her lips pointed down. Yasu scowled as well. As Yasu gazed at her, the girl looked at the clock one last time, thrust her hands on her hips, and walked away. Before he knew what he was doing, he jumped to his feet. "Wait!" he cried. The girl turned around and smiled. Yasu noticed she had a dimple in her left cheek. It disappeared quickly when the girl saw a stranger had called to her. She turned on her heels and started out of the station. "Wait!" Yasu called again. "I know I'm not the one you're waiting for," he said as he caught up to her, "but I would be honored if you would take a walk with me." He lowered his eyes and bowed. "My name is Yasu Takahashi. Come. Ask the station master. He will tell you I am respectable." He led her inside the station over to Mr. Yashikawa's office. "Happy New Year," Yasu said, bowing to his friend. He gave the station master the gift he had brought. "I would like you to meet..." "My name is Miyuki," the girl said with a bow to the station master. "I am pleased to meet you," the station master said, returning the bow. "And I am pleased to see you have met my friend Yasu. He is a fine young man, patient and devoted, loyal and responsible, known far and wide for his kindness." The station master smiled proudly. "And he is about to be rewarded for a very kind thing that he did many years ago." The station master winked at Yasu. "Make sure you tell her all about your friend Hachiko." "The faithful dog?" the girl said. "Did you know him?" "Yes, I did," said Yasu, leading the girl out of the station. As they walked, he told her all about Hachiko, and even though the day was windy and cold, they walked and talked all afternoon. And here's a picture. Yasu and Miyuki spent the next afternoon together and the afternoon after that as well. Soon they were spending all their time together. Soon they fell in love. Yasu and Miyuki were together in the spring when the cherry blossoms bloomed and in the summer when the rains came. They were together in the fall when the leaves changed color and in the winter when the snow fell. Yasu brought Miyuki back home to meet his family. His mother and father thought she was a fine young woman. Miyuki brought Yasu home to meet her family. Her mother and father thought he was a fine young man. A year passed, and Yasu asked Miyuki to meet him at Hachi's statue in Shibuya Station on New Year's Day at 3 o'clock. He said he had something very important to ask her. Yasu arrived at the station at 5 minutes to 3. He stood beside Hachiko, looking to his right and to his left and to his right again, searching the steady stream of travelers for the one face that would make his belly tremble with joy. At last he saw Miyuki coming toward him, and the sight of her made his own face light up like the sun. Hello, Miyuki, Yasu said. He took both her hands in his and stared into her lovely dark eyes. Hello, Yasu, Miyuki said. What is it you have to ask me? Yasu cleared his throat several times before he spoke. Miyuki, he said, soon I will finish my studies, and then, Yasu squeezed her hands tightly, and then, will you marry me? I promise that if you say yes, I will be as devoted to you as Hachiko was to Professor Uno for all the days of my life. Yasu and Miyuki both turned toward the statue of Hachiko sitting up tall and proud. Then they turned back toward each other. Miyuki looked into Yasu's eyes. Her lips curved up into a smile, and the dimple he loved so well appeared in her left cheek. Yes, Yasu, I will marry you, she said, her voice full of happiness. And I promise that for all the days of my life, I will be as devoted to you as you were to Hachi, the faithful dog of Japan. All right, boys and girls, pretty cool story. And there's one last thing that I want to read to. It's called the author's note, and I think you might enjoy this as well. I know this is a little bit longer than what you're used to listening to a story. So this would be the real work about the story. Hachiko Waits is a work of fiction inspired by a true story. In January of 1924, Professor Uno adopted a 3-month-old Akitakin puppy and named him Hachi. The professor traveled to work by train, and every day Hachi accompanied him to the train station. After the professor's train left, Hachi ran home, and every day he returned to Shibuya Station just before 3 o'clock to meet his master. The day of May of 1925, Professor Uno died unexpectedly at work. Hachi waited at the train station for his master to come home that day and every day after that for approximately 10 years. Although Yasu and his family are fictional characters, many people, including Mr. Yakakwashi, cared for Hachiko as he came to be called over the next decade. He died of natural causes while waiting for his master. The people of Japan were so impressed by Hachiko's loyalty that they decided to erect a statue in his honor and to place it at Shibuya Station. Money was raised and an artist named Tira Ando was hired. In 1934, just after a year before Hachiko died, a ceremony attended by many people was held to dedicate the statue. During World War II, Hachiko's statue was melted down so that the metal could be used in a war effort. After the war, Takeshi Ando, the sculptor Terry Ando's son, created an identical statue to replace the original one, and another dedication ceremony attended by an enormous crowd was held. This second statue is still at Shibuya Station today, and it is a very popular meeting place. Over the years, it has become a tradition for young couples to pledge their loyalty to each other in front of Hachi's statue. Though many years have passed since Hachiko waited for Professor Uno at the train station, he has not been forgotten. To this day, his story is taught to school children all over Japan. And every year on April 8th, a memorial service is held at Shibuya Station to honor Hachiko, the faithful dog of Japan. So pretty cool to think about that story. Now, if you want to see the story, Hachi, it was made into a movie. It's not going to be exactly the same, but it is similar. You can find it. You can rent it, I know, on Amazon Prime for $3.99. And I believe it's also streaming on Hulu. I checked Netflix and it's not on there. So if you want to watch the movie Hachi, you would just look up Hachi on either Hulu or Amazon Prime. Ask a parent to help you if you're not sure. And make sure that if you rent the movie, you ask before you rent it. I hope you enjoyed Hachiko Waits as much as I did.